We're recording now.
Okay, thank you. All right, it is 7 o'clock, and I'd like to call the July 30th special meeting of the Wilton Board of Education to order. Has all the board members, have you had a chance to review and approve the agenda?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, is there a motion to approve it?
So moved.
Thank you, Glenn. Second?
Second.
Thanks, Ruth. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposition? Okay, thank you. Comments from the public. Again, this is through email, so I have to ask Lucille, did you get any thing labeled comments from the public via email?
Lucille.
And Lucille, you're on mute if you tried to answer that.
I'm answering. No, I did not get any. I just wanted to check one more time.
All right, appreciate it. Thank you. Consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Thanks, Glenn. Second?
Second.
Thanks, Gretchen. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay. Reports and recognition. I just want to take, I think it's important and a happy occasion to congratulate Lauren Feltz on her appointment as Deep River Elementary School principal. So I wanted to thank Lauren for her stewardship at Middlebrook, and before that, her excellent work in the classroom with elementary students. So thank you so much, and we wish you absolutely the best going forward. So thank you. I also want to continue our thanks to the staff for working 24/7 at least. Some of you are doing 30 out of 7, 30 hours, 7 days a week. It's monumental, and I don't remember a summer like this or any period like this. And so I think we're very fortunate that we have such a dedicated staff. So thank you to the whole team. Also want to thank parents for keeping track of our meetings and for emailing either the board or providing your input at the email labeled that. So again, thank you for all your thoughts and perspectives. They help as the staff considers the best way to plan for reopening. I do want to say that tonight, for anyone listening, there will not be a final determination as to which model to use at which school. That's not for tonight, but we are going to concentrate on hearing what the plans are for learning at each of the schools under each of the scenarios, what the student day will look like, and what some of the thinking is around schedules. So that's an awful lot, but we have spent the last few meetings looking at health and safety and logistics. And so tonight we're going to turn a little bit and shine the light on what the students are going to experience in terms of their education during the school day. So Kevin, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thank you. And let me just, before we begin, echo your sentiments and just thank Lauren Feltz again for her incredible service to the Wilton Public Schools. She's a strong leader and a tremendous thought partner to all of us, and always willing to step in and roll up her sleeves. And so it's a loss for us and a tremendous gain for the community up at Deep River. And so Lauren, know that you will be sincerely missed, and we want to just thank you again. So
Thank you.
Decision.
Thank you. It's been my honor. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks, Lauren. And the board's also aware. We've named Brian Fagan as the interim principal for Middlebrook. He's taking the next 2 weeks and transitioning with Lauren. Brian comes to us with just an incredible wealth of experience as an administrator, both elementary school principal, middle school principal, and since his retirement, he has been serving in a number of roles around the region. Most recently, he was here with us and filling in for Maria while she was out on maternity leave. He has served as assistant superintendent in some other communities and just has a tremendous background. So we're in very good hands with Brian, working with that team over there and stewarding Middlebrook toward a successful opening. And then we'll come back to the board with a plan to conduct a search later on once the school year has resumed. So now transitioning to our update, it's a couple of things just to make the board aware of. In a moment, I'm going to turn the reins over to Chuck and Fran, and they'll walk you through some greater detail about what we're anticipating in terms of each of those three models. Today, we started meeting with each of the faculty, so I had the opportunity to speak with teachers from the high school, Middlebrook, and Cider Mill tomorrow morning. I'll be speaking with the folks at Miller Driscoll. I'll be working with the principals as well to schedule some parent meetings. What I'm proposing that we do with each of the principals is schedule, either school-wide or grade level specific opportunities to speak to parents. I think in that format, we can speak better to their grade level questions and concerns. And so we'll set those up and send that schedule out next week, and we'll get those conversations rolling as quickly as possible. Also, with respect to kind of making a final determination about what model we'll be able to use to open the school district, I sent to you all earlier the guidance that came in this afternoon from the State Department of Education. They have provided some transmission rate guidance, and it looks like the Department of Public Health will be providing weekly updates that we can look at, assess, and help make some determinations. My goal would be, to continue to refine our plans, present the final details for you, and have hopefully a final decision somewhere mid-August, and so we give people some additional time to plan.
Yeah, Kevin, regarding that, may I ask a question, please? As I read it, if the prevalence or the occurrence is low, we don't have options. We have to be fully open.
No, that's not how I read it, Glenn. If prevalence rate remains low, I think the language they used was schools could, kind of at least, partially bring students back. And so my interpretation was either, all students back or in a hybrid. If prevalence rates were low and we wanted to go to a full remote option for everybody, then it looks like we would have to get waivers from the State Department of Education.
Okay, I'll go back and look at it again then. Okay, all right, I'll take another look. All right, thank you.
We'll post it on our website with other information, so people can read it at their leisure.
All right, thanks.
Sure. Okay, and then I just be quiet, and Chuck and Fran can now just share with you some of our further thinking on what a student day is going to look like.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Karen, can you let me share the screen?
Sure. Okay, so you're co-host now.
Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, so tonight what we wanted to do was to share with the entire school community what blended learning is going to look like in action when we reopen. And we want to make sure that everybody's clear about what that would look like for each of the phases of opening, whether it's full in-person, hybrid, or full remote. I think it's important to understand that in developing this model, we leaned heavily on the guidance from the State Ed Department, as well as all of the research that we could find on what are best practices in blended learning. What we're going to do tonight is we're going to provide you an overview that would be applicable across the entire district. Our hope was that at the next meeting, we could have each of the individual schools present detailed plans for each of their schools. We're still working out some of the details, but hopefully within the next week or so, we can share with the staff, with the school community, very detailed plans.
So there's been a lot of work around creating a plan around the idea of the Wilton blended learning model. And this is our theory of action. So it has all the elements of the plan. And we start with, if Wilton engages all students, families, educators, and administrators in equitable, high quality blended learning. We do this by structuring operations, creating opportunities for real-time live instruction, collaboration. Very important that we include time for teachers to be able to plan and engage in the professional learning that's needed in this new type of learning environment, and engage our families in providing that support and partnership that we need. We've also been very much engaged in designing and the delivery of effective e-learning and what that looks like. We've begun our work within that whole curriculum work with Schoology in building those engaging, standards aligned and accessible curriculum content. We've been very cognizant of being culturally responsive and keeping in mind that this is still student-centered, regardless of how distance learning and hybrid learning might seem. We really are still trying to go for the best practices in terms of pedagogy. One of the charges that we're working on right now is to ensure that our students develop the digital literacy skills that they need in order to navigate this learning environment. The other part of this is that we're fostering a positive environment, and that will include communication with not only students but families, ensuring as we're creating our Schoology units, we've been very explicit about highlighting learning targets and finding different ways of collaborating, because this is a different environment and we need collaboration as a very big part of this. And certainly we will continue using the systems we have to progress monitor and make decisions in an innovative way. So our goals are really to make sure that we're safeguarding the safety and well-being of students, families, and staff, but making sure that they feel that sense of community, focusing on SEL as well as academic and continuing of learning, looking at how we can decrease the disparities in outcomes, and finding ways to accelerate students' and educators' ability to learn and improve themselves. So as a result of doing all of these things, Wilton will develop connected, focused, empowered, and masterful learners that are career-ready graduates.
All right, so as we were developing this blended learning model, we had some guiding principles in mind. I think the most important is that we wanted to ensure that there was continuity of learning. We all know what good teaching looks like, and what we want to do is to make sure that high quality teaching occurs across all three phases of opening, and that we can do that seamlessly. And what we've listed here, I think, are just some basic best practices in instruction. Along with that, we also want to make sure that we're developing a community of learners. You know, our teachers are very good about developing that community of learners in a live situation. We need to help and support them in making sure that that same community of learners is established and sustained and nurtured no matter what phase that we're in. And then finally, we want to make sure that we're not losing sight of all of the hard work that we've done around our district vision and mission. So we want to make sure that our students are still pursuing opportunities around global citizenship, that they're being involved in meaningful real-world problem solving, and that they're connecting with people beyond the classroom, whether they be experts or peers across the globe.
So in the past few weeks, we've talked a lot about the support that we've been building around creating almost like an infrastructure for the learning experiences in blended learning. Eric Hawkinson and his team have been looking at and upgrading Wi-Fi that would include the inside and the outdoor spaces. We have in the past and will continue to provide Wi-Fi hotspots for the families that need them at home. In the past week, we've created what we're calling the Wilton Public Schools Teacher Station that includes AV capability in each of the classrooms, including a wireless microphone, improved sound fields, at least for our K-8 classrooms, document cameras. We've integrated Zoom within Schoology for that video conferencing, and the ability to be able to do things like breakout groups. And we continue talking about the fact that Schoology is going to anchor our work in connecting all of these different models, whether we're online, hybrid, or on-site. In terms of devices, we have the actual Chromebooks either came in or are here for grades 1, 3, and 6, new Chromebooks, and additional devices for our LLCs, especially at the high school. We've made plans and have guidelines for the collection, disinfecting, inventorying, and pre-checking out the devices to the students so that they're ready for the beginning of the school year. The content and productivity tools are really very important to further how we use Schoology and integrate other digital tools for lots of different types of interactive experiences. We've begun working on what the professional development plan looks like for the beginning of the school year that will include things like how to actually use that teacher workstation I referred to. What does blended learning actually look like? Testing it out and doing demos, and of course, using Schoology. And finally, we're partnering with our parents. We've met with our PTA presidents. I'm scheduling a group with some parents to take a look at Schoology in the next week and a half. And we've begun with some students actually helping us be power users and experimenters in Schoology beginning next week. So we are doing all that we can in terms of supporting and creating that infrastructure we need.
Fran, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Just going back the slide prior, in terms of the devices and the connections and all of that, are we going to have all the materials in time?
Yes, and you know, this is not a small feat. I really applaud all of the people, Eric and Kevin, and you know, the accounting people. It's been not easy, as we had talked about the devices actually being out of supply. We were having the same problem with just about every other piece of technology, as every single district has been essentially going, you know, buying the same thing. So we were able to procure the numbers that we needed. So we're really very pleased about that.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so this is an important slide. This lays out the various phases of reopening. I think it's important to realize that the determination of which phase we will begin in or move to will be done in consultation with the Department of Health and will be based upon the extent of community spread of the virus. It's also going to be based in part on our ability to implement all of the mitigation measures to protect the health and safety of our students and staff. So Plan A, which is in green, is the in-person opening. Students will have the opportunity to attend school in person for a full day, every day. What's important to keep in mind is that the state also requires that even if we do afford the opportunity for students to come in person, we also have to offer parents the option to remain in a remote learning environment. Plan B is the hybrid. Students will participate in full day learning both in school and at home. And by that, we mean that students are going to be divided into cohorts. So for example, cohort 1 may attend school in person on Monday and Tuesday, while cohort 2 participates remotely. Wednesday, most students will participate remotely while the buildings are deep cleaned. Then cohort 2 will attend school in person on Thursday and Friday, while cohort 1 participates remotely. Again, as in Plan A, there may be some parents who opt to have their students participate just remotely. And then finally, Plan C, which is the full remote, where all students will participate in full remote learning. And we are suggesting that we would probably shorten the day for students, primarily to control the amount of screen time that they are experiencing. That does not mean that we would be in any way trying to achieve less in terms of the curriculum. It's really about screen time.
Chuck, may I ask a question, please?
You may.
The hybrid plan. We had talked, and I had thought and had presented and proffered that one of the plans, the intent here is to try, I think, or the desire to get school students in the classroom as much as possible. A number of parents over the last few weeks have written letters and proposed, and we talked about it at our last meeting, a 5-day on, 5-day off plan. Cohort 1 comes Monday through Friday. Cohort 2 is offline or remote. The following week they switch. Next week it goes back. A simple plan like that gives the students what they need is the maximum amount of classroom time to be together, to be face-to-face with the teacher. Can you tell me how we came to this plan versus doing something like that?
I believe, Glenn, that the general consent, I think there are a couple of factors that brought us to this. Okay. Number one, I think there's a feeling that for some of our students, an entire week remotely is too long to go without seeing a teacher.
Okay.
Secondly, in discussing the direction that most of our neighboring communities are going in, we're finding that this is the option that most of the school districts are centering on. And that would make it much easier for our staff who may live in neighboring communities to arrange for work and childcare.
All right, well, okay. I just thought, that what I have thought and have taken from all of the direction that has come up is that the objective is to try and get students in front of the teachers as much as possible. And I guess this gets them 4 days in 2 weeks versus 5 days in 2 weeks. So it's a day difference, I guess. Okay, if this is what we've come to, then I'll accept it. That's okay. I was just hoping that it would be, I guess the ultimate goal is to try and come up with a concrete plan that we can communicate as soon as possible to parents. This is what we're doing and this is what you can expect. And that's really.
I have one more question because, like Glenn, I remember also hearing about that model and reading about that model. So I would be curious as to how much staff discussions were involved in coming to the sort of 2-1-2 model. That would be crucial to me is knowing where the staff is coming from.
Kevin, do you want to speak to that? Because that was your committee.
That various administrators at their buildings had talked about this, so I'll defer to them. I will say, when I was on with 3 of the 4 faculties today, and we did discuss this model. It wasn't a conversation around whether or not they thought this model was preferable to another model, but with respect to this is a hybrid concept, I don't think I heard any objection to this approach, and the theorizing around it, Chuck, is pretty much what you described. But Jen, you're on. You want to talk about your conversation with faculty over this? Sorry, Jen, you just muted yourself.
Sorry, I think I have Chuck's. Okay, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
All right. So, I think 5 days of not seeing an elementary student specifically is a long time to keep engagement going. I think that we did a phenomenal job trying to keep the learning going, but engagement was something that we really struggled with. And obviously, we would like, our students to be with the teachers as frequently as possible. We do think that having 2 days in a row gives some good sustained time with the teacher to really focus on building those relationships. There's really no perfect scenario for any of this. And so we really determined that feels like the best of some of the different models that we've seen.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to flesh it out a little bit.
Yeah.
Jen,
And
did you
that's
have a
just
question?
from my perspective.
I do have a question.
Sure.
What are
Go
we
ahead.
doing about, there's a number of holidays that fall on Mondays or Tuesdays. Or what are we trying to do to help with whoever goes on Monday and Tuesday?
I think we would figure a lot of that out once we decided upon the model. At this point, we're just trying to simply figure out which model works. I know Miller Driscoll is looking at a different kind of a hybrid model, and I think that, we'll get into the actual implementation parts of it and looking at calendars and things like that once we have determined an actual plan.
So is this, as far as the hybrid plan being a 2-1-2, is that one in the middle day, sort of a flexible day where if you've got a holiday, maybe the cleaning is not happening during like the standard shift, maybe it's on like the third shift where they're
we're definitely envisioning it as a flex day, but not just a flex day. It's going to be definitely all kids are going to be receiving instruction. It may be remote at that point and running a regular schedule, but it also provides an opportunity for maybe some students to still come on site depending on the level of need. We do know that, there's a varying level of need for different students, and it does provide us for some flexibility in giving different students more opportunity to have some.
Sorry, I didn't mean that the Wednesday would be a flex day as far as no education. I just thought it was more of a flex day as it's either in school learning or remote school learning. Because I think
I think we're all really committed to having 2 days with our students. So we would definitely be flexible in looking at the calendar. I think that would have to be set ahead of time. There's not a lot to do with winter and stuff like that, but obviously when we go forward, we'll plan.
Okay.
I just wanted to invite Don to weigh in because I know he and the leadership team at the high school had also worked through this, and Greg Terrio was imagining. Greg's one of the assistant principals, was looking at the calendar for the full year and thought we could manage holidays and the like. So Don, do you want to weigh in?
Sure. Well, we researched the different possible sequences for the hybrid plan. First, the principal visited with the other Fairfield County principals to determine what high schools were doing, and there are different plans available. And it's true there's this 5-day in, 5-day out, or a 4-day in, 4-day out, which looks attractive on its face to be sure. But when you really study it, it turns out that plan gives out something nice with its right hand, but then takes it right back with its left hand, because you feel good about the continuity of the 5 days, but you have to feel equally troubled by the discontinuity of the 5 days that the students are out. So the general consensus among high school educators was to find a rhythm that would allow for some continuity without too much discontinuity. The 2-1-2 model seemed to be very, very appropriate. So then we actually presented that to our leadership team on Tuesday, including the one that you're seeing now proposed by Dr. Smith, and we didn't get any objection from our leadership team to the plan. So it's been floated to our first important canary in the mine, our leadership team, and it's going to be discussed with the faculty soon. And I think that it'll be well received, and I think it's the best thing for kids.
Can I ask a question about the cohorts?
Yes.
Are you envisioning the cohorts to start off with being one class that then gets split in two? Or is it the cohort kind of like half the classes in that grade?
Well, the philosophy behind the cohort is rooted more in epidemiology, I guess, than pedagogy, sadly. You want to create less chance that there's going to be cross-pollination between groups of kids. So you create these two groups of kids, and now there's only half of the people in the building at the same time, making it less likely that they're going to, spread any germs or anything. Now you have to take care of half of those kids, right? So how do you create these cohorts? And we settled on an alphabetical split because you want siblings to be in the same place, right? It'd be a nightmare for families if a junior was in school, but a freshman was home and so forth. So you do it on an alphabetical split. And we just looked at our roster and found the point in the alphabet where we had a pretty even balance. We have 1,297 kids. We tried to get as close to 50-50 as we could. And now doing that doesn't ensure that any one given class in the high school is going to be perfectly half full, but it will be significantly less full to the point where we can socially distance and do things that are safe and good for kids while keeping the instruction vibrant. So the cohorts are constructed alphabetically across the whole school in order to make sure that we have the space to do what we need to do.
And so it will be kind of one class unit, and then some of the people in that class will just never actually physically interact with each other.
Right. So cohort 1 is every student whose last name begins with A through LE. And in that range, you're going to have people from all 4 classes in all different situations. And, you know, they'll be going about their class schedules, which are varied and personalized. But there'll only be 650 people in the building instead of 1,300.
And is that strategy being used across the board at all the buildings?
We haven't come to a conclusion about that. One of our goals is to try to make the cohorting work for families as well. So the alphabetic approach does work. I do know that at Miller Driscoll, they really would like to do full classes in and out. But that might require that they go back and regroup their kids to do that, so that they create classes of students with last names A to L, and then classes of students M to Z. But we have not yet come to a conclusion about whether that's what we're going to do.
So I think that communicating that perhaps sooner rather than later would also be helpful for families. So if they have multiple kids in different lower schools, to be able to start kind of figuring out their potential daycare needs and plans.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Ruth, and we do have, you know, to the extent it's accurate in Power School, we do have sibling lists. And so we are looking at that. And I think, you know, as Chuck just described, we need to, as we're particularly with Miller Driscoll, as they're looking at this very different cohort model, we need to get really granular and look at potential impact on families. And, you know, obviously that's going to be a key factor in, you know, how we decide to move forward. So I think, you know, these are exactly the kinds of things that, you know, we've got a model, we've got an approach, we've got some good detail. But now we need to really drill in and dig deeper to make sure that, you know, things line up the way we might be thinking.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to go to Don's point that he made about the epidemiology part of it. If the goal of cohorting is, yes, to keep a group of kids together and to interact with others, other groups as little as possible, we also have the social distancing aspect. And I know at least at the high school, we were concerned that 3 feet, you know, might be questionable. So doing the alphabetical model, you know, would bring it hopefully to closer to 6 feet, you know, just doing mathematically if you take half the class. So I think one of the benefits at the lower grades would also be social distancing. So I know there's a lot to weigh, but, you know, I would just encourage people to look at the health reasons for the hybrid is typically fewer kids. And to me, that means more social distance.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, look, you know, the hybrid plan that you're putting forward, from my perspective, that's fine. Yeah, I mean, obviously it's been thoroughly discussed and thought out and all the options examined. I just hope we can come quickly. I mean, it's August 1st almost, that we need to lock in as soon as possible our plan. What are we doing that we can communicate to the community and to the parents, and they can begin to make their plans. We're around the corner from school starting. And if this is what you settled on, rightfully so, with a lot of discussion, a lot of hard work, and a lot of dialogue, great. I buy in. I'm for it. Let's do it. And let's lock it up, finalize it, and be able to communicate it to the community as quickly as we possibly can so they can begin to get their family lives in order and make all the alternative plans that they're going to have to make to follow this hybrid plan, if that's what we come to. That's all I said. Okay.
Chuck, are you able to share any thoughts behind Miller Driscoll's possible A through L or whatever, but whole class thoughts?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the beginning part of your question.
Are you guys able to share why Miller Driscoll would be a little bit different in terms of their plan? Why are they thinking what they're thinking?
Can I call on my good friend Kathy Kuhn to explain that to you?
I wasn't sure if she was on or not. Yep.
Kathy's not here. I'm here, Chuck.
Okay.
But our thinking basically is that the children that would have to access instruction at home remotely, and live stream, for example, into the classroom. If I'm a classroom teacher and I have 10 5-year-olds in front of me, and I'm also expecting 10 5-year-olds at home to live stream into a classroom, we're very concerned about what that will look like for those children at home. So we want the kids in front of their teacher. If we do this model, they'll be fully in front of their teacher for classroom instruction on their in-school days, and the teacher will be able to then adjust their instruction to meet the needs of the students over the computer or remotely on their at-home days. So we're very concerned about the developmental level of the students and how they would respond to accessing instruction through a live stream.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I guess my only thought then would to be at that, is there a way then that we can think about how the building is used during the hybrid model to facilitate more social distancing while those classes are actually there, because you are going to be having the building half empty. So is there, I know that there are solid walls, but is there ways that we can think about using the building to then find a way that more often than not, we can be in an environment in the hybrid model that facilitates 6 feet if you're going to have a full class, but in a half empty building?
Yeah, we can definitely explore options in terms of building use. Like Chuck pointed out, these plans are in development. So over the next week, we have to work out some of the details. And once we do that, we'll have a more specific kind of outlook and plan for you.
And
I definitely expect that we'll be able to keep kids further apart under the hybrid plan and be more efficient and ergonomic in the use of the space.
Yeah, and I would just add, Ruth, I think last board meeting, you mentioned you love the idea of tents. And so with those tents and some outdoor swing space, we can do a lot instructionally.
Yes, through probably, November. But then just in general, I just want to make sure that we're like achieving both goals here. That, with I think on the high school, it's different.
It is. And I think, this is the Miller Driscoll proposal is, it's a good example of and I know it's not lost on anyone that's on this call, but it's a good example of the, not only the complexity, but the kind of the competing demands and priorities, if you like, that we are confronting and trying to overcome as we develop these plans. And I think, as I've said to at least the administrators and the staff here, we are, to the extent that it's available, we're also trying to be guided by science and, certainly by our medical expertise here in the community and our health director. And so, anything that, we put forward, not only, to all of you, will have to be vetted and, approved by those folks as well. So, I think we can take a little bit of comfort in some of the recent research that we've, discussed previously about, what transmission looks like when you compare our youngest learners and our oldest learners. And there does seem to be some differences that we're all certainly mindful of as we're working through some of these really challenging dynamics. Great. Chuck, do you want to continue, please?
Sure. So in terms of the in-person learning, again, just to repeat, most students attend school and follow typical school schedule for a full day of learning. some students may participate fully remotely. Care will be given to ensure that instructional time will be balanced between on and off-screen activities. So even though our students are there full-time and they're using Schoology, we're going to be making sure that we are very careful about how much time they are actually on screen. And during this time, we will be following the guidelines for social distancing and safety. All of the cleaning protocols, the wearing of masks, hand washing. Kevin's been doing a lot of work with signage around foot traffic, protocols for social distancing in all areas of the school. We have made the decision that lunches will be held in the classrooms and that students will have as much as possible individual supplies rather than shared materials.
Can I just ask a quick question? When it comes to some of the older grades, you know, like high school, is like lunch going to be by homeroom or something like that? Is that what you're envisioning? Is like high school also lunch in a classroom?
Yes, high school will be lunch in the classroom. I'm not sure how. Don, do you want to weigh in on that?
In general, the lunch becomes part of an elongated period during the day of instruction, and it rotates through 3 or 4 different waves, 3 different waves right now. So during the lunch hour, students have 2 periods of instruction and then a segment of lunch. So it's basically they'd be in a class, and that would become the place where they have lunch in most cases. And there are kinks to iron out. For example, you know, there are OSHA regulations about eating in science labs and things like that that are unsavory that you want to avoid. And we want to be careful about how we manage that space. You know, you have students who are going to be taking their masks off to eat, and that creates a certain amount of understandable pause for people in the area. So we have to be careful about how we design that. But in general, the lunch experience will happen during a student's class, a different class every day, because that rotates through the schedule.
Okay, and then for Middlebrook or Cider Mill, since there is a designated lunch time, it will just be at whatever class that they were in right before that. Is that how that's going to work, Chuck?
At Middlebrook, the students will be mostly grouped in their team-based classrooms, so that will be where they would expect to have their lunch as well.
Okay.
And ours would be in the home base classroom.
Likewise with Miller Driscoll.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, if we're ready to move on, we'll go to Plan B.
Okay, so I'll talk a little bit about the Plan B, which is, we've talked a lot about hybrid. As Chuck was explaining, what this means is the 2 cohorts, which is basically a 50-50 split between a cohort A that might be going on Monday and Tuesday and cohort B that would attend on Thursday and Friday. We're talking about Wednesday as being the day that is more flexible. Every student is participating remotely, although there is lots of flexibility in terms of perhaps bringing some students that have the needs that might come in for that part of that day. There will still be, as there are with every single plan, some students that will participate fully remotely, so they would not be coming in on site. We're following a typical school schedule. So regardless of the fact that we have some students that would be on site and others that would be tuning in online, they will be following that same schedule. It will be school regardless of where they are. And care will be given to that on-screen, off-screen activities. We are mindful, regardless of whether they're in class or at home, that screen time is an issue. And the way that we're designing our instructional units provide for, time off screen. There will be real live teaching opportunities. We'll talk real-time live teaching opportunities. We've talked about the video streaming. That's what we're referring to there, as well as independent learning activities. We have to be very clear about how that actually takes place during a lesson. Primarily, you might see some whole group instruction that's live teaching in real time, whereas you may have some independent collaboration type of activities that might be done without that real-time streaming. We're looking at the schedules being appropriate as, you know, the Miller Driscoll folks were talking about, to be developmentally appropriate. A lot of the coordination has been given around having siblings in the same cohort, so that if you have children in more than one school, that potentially that the children would be in that same cohort from school to school within that program. Okay.
Can I ask you guys one quick question about that? Fran, have you guys given any thought to, Chuck, can you go, yep, thanks. When you guys are talking about real-time live opportunities will occur along with independent, have you guys given any thoughts on the percentage of what will be real-time and what will be independent learning?
Well, it's going to vary from lesson to lesson probably, and from subject to subject. But in any lesson and any time that you design, you know, instruction, there's opportunity to for demonstration, for, you know, perhaps a mini lesson, content delivery. You know, you could have that live streaming opportunity for small group. With Zoom, you can do breakout rooms, and that might be an opportunity for students to interact with each other. You know, a lot of what happens with hybrid and so important is that students feel included and don't feel like, you know, they're the online as opposed to the on-site, that they're part of that same learning community. That relationship is very important, so that if there are opportunities that can be had where students are collaborating with each other, regardless of whether they're at home or they're absolutely in school at that point, that happens. In terms of percentage, it's hard to say. You know, sometimes you might start a lesson and you're doing 15 minutes worth of whole class instruction. Other days it may be less or more. You know, I've suggested that students check in, have that time in the very beginning, perhaps this independence in the middle, and then at the end there's like a check-in or a share out of what they've learned, kind of like an exit ticket. So there may be a rhythm to it. One of the things that we're doing, because this is all new, it's new to everyone, it's in the next week. I've been working with the buildings, our technology instructional leaders, in bringing in actual, you know, lessons and sandboxing it and seeing what that might look like, so that we can play it out, so that we can have different iterations to see what works best for the teachers and for the students. So we are in the process of doing that next week.
Great. I'm going to just, if you don't mind, because I think it's really, this is such an important part of the conversation, and it's important for all of you as well as people who are, you know, listening and at home. Our commitment to this is to try to integrate the students who are participating in remote learning into a full learning experience. And so, you know, have been talking about this with our staff members and, you know, our teachers, and I think even some of us are really, we're still trying to nail down, you know, exactly what it's going to look like, how it's going to operate for kids at home. But our goal is to make sure that the end user experience really is high quality. This week, we had the opportunity to interface with Marie Alcock, who some of you may remember. She was the facilitator that worked with us in the, that initial development of our Portrait of the Graduate, which is, you know, work, again, we'll have to come back to. Marie works all over the globe, and in recent months, she's been working with schools in Hong Kong. And so she was really helpful in giving us some early lessons from the field. So some of those schools were some of the first to go back with kids. And, you know, she spoke with a group of our administrators yesterday. Fran and I went on with her earlier in the week. And, you know, she described, you know, kind of one of the mistakes that was made in Hong Kong. And it was this, you just kind of throw the camera on in the classroom, and the assumption is that students are at home kind of watching. And she referred to it as a fly on the wall model. And while, you know, we were never conceiving of that, I completely understand the danger and why an approach like that wouldn't be successful. And so when we talk about live instruction, you know, what we're talking about is, you know, the extent to which kids are fully able to participate in class. So it's not only seeing the teacher and getting the direct instruction, it's also participating with peers. We think through Schoology and all of those tools that are embedded in Schoology, and trying to replicate some of those live classroom experiences that are so rich and meaningful for kids' learning. I think that the final piece of that is too that Marie really kind of brought home and raised the point so well, was that it's critically important that as we are, considering classes and thinking about these students who are at home, that, we begin with the mindset that these students are full members of the class. And again, I would just, kind of take you back to your own experiences through Zoom. And I think, for us, it's a particular caution because things happen so fast in a classroom. We have to have structures in place that enable us to fully support those students. And so we're going to continue those conversations with Marie, because she's been identifying some of the traps that schools who've been open and running now for a while. She's also been able to highlight for us some real success stories. And so as Fran was kind of just naming a minute ago, it's my very full intention here that as we come up with models, we have an opportunity to test them so we can really try to understand and gain some insight about what the user experience is. And so what I'm imagining as some of our staff members also begin to really think very deeply about this, they're going to come forward with different ideas and different models. And as long as we can keep that goal at the bottom, that we want kids to be as fully integrated into the learning as possible, I think we have to be open to some different ideas and suggestions about what that might look like.
I think that's a good challenge for all of us, Kevin. When you called it a fly on the wall approach, quite frankly, that's where I am, or was anyway, because when you say you want a student to be fully engaged in the classroom, you immediately go to, following the teacher around, listening to every question, hearing every comment, definitely following along on the smartboard or the board. So I know there'll be a lot of that. But you're right. We probably, even though I can't quite wrap my head around it, I understand the perhaps lack of real engagement unless we also add another layer of creativity to it. So while I'm skeptical, I'm also wanting to hear more. But I like the start with the assumption or the goal that every kid has to be engaged. And if it's not, if some things limit because you're at home on a computer, then how do you compensate or adapt or whatever? So I think that's a fair point. I think it's a complicated point, and I'm not sure that we have a good picture of what that looks like. But I'm glad you brought it up tonight. So, more left to be done. So, so anyway, I have to think about that, and I think we all have to hear more about it. But as long as the teacher's the cornerstone, I think that was a word you used last week, and as long as the theme is engagement, I guess, those of us that aren't in the classroom won't be a student. We really have to try to follow your lead and see where, the best thinking is. And so, thanks for consulting, outside the district and globally. But I will say it's still challenging to see it or to imagine it. So if we could hear more, that would be great.
Yeah, I would say, for all of us, every conversation we've had, I guess I go back to that last point that Fran made is, it's, for me, it's because again, there is no playbook here. And so we have kind of, as you've seen, our guiding principles and our goals and what we want to achieve. And we are universally, I think, committed to those. And so now, Fran and others are going to be working with some of our staff. We're going to be inviting in students. And, I think we're going to try to play with some of these ideas, and then we can develop some mental models and then, hopefully paint a richer picture. But I agree with you. I think, if you surveyed all of us, we were all in that same camp of just struggling, again, especially when you consider kind of start at the earliest grades and, work your way up through 12th grade, struggling to develop a clear picture of how it's all going to come together. It is without question, I think far and away one of the greatest challenges I think we've all had so far.
And you're also struggling with some of the experiences last spring, which, you know, was done under a sort of a different landscape. And while some kids did wonderfully and, you know, teachers were able to engage, that wasn't that consistent. And so some kids did end up being bored or unmotivated or distant or never seeing the teacher, that sort of thing. So we have to make sure that we are not, you know, repeating that we're doing something different and that we are promising, you know, or striving for, you know, full engagement for all our kids. And a lot of it will be watching the teacher and seeing the teacher in the classroom, but there are also some other strategies that are probably better than just looking in from the computer. There may be something even better out there for a piece of the day or a piece of a class. Okay, so anyway, it's a challenge. So thank you. I'll be quiet.
So the plan C as we move forward is if this were to happen that we needed to go fully remote, all students would attend from home and access the instruction as they would through the other models online. And we'd follow, as Chuck was mentioning, we'd follow a slightly modified day schedule to allow for less screen time and also for some other flexibility that's needed when we're doing fully remote. Unlike the spring, we would actually have a difference in terms of how we would approach fully remote with real-time live teaching opportunities occurring throughout the day, as well as those independent learning activities as appropriate for the curriculum.
Can I ask a quick question for basically, I think it was Cider Mill and Middlebrook that have the 6-day cycles. Is that going to be changed at all with the specials? Is it going to only for hybrid and for remote, would it be only a 5-day cycle instead and you'd work in the specials as needed or as decided as what was being used?
So at Middlebrook, we're taking a new approach to our stride scheduling, primarily because from a developmental standpoint, in a typical year, we want kids to cross-pollinate as much as possible between teams during stride. That's something we think is great for their social development. So our restructuring of the stride schedule has much more to do with trying to maintain cohorts as much as possible and making sure that even if we have to cross-pollinate, that at least we do it within the team. So that smaller cohort within the bigger team cohort. So our rotation is going to change. Typically, we have a 6-day rotation where some things are rotating every 3 days and some things are rotating every 2 days. We anticipate at this point, our current plan is that everything will be on an every 3-day rotation, and we have some plans about how to make all of that balance out. I actually think that it's beneficial not to go to a 5-day rotation, because if you go to a 5-day rotation and you always drop Wednesdays, and you have gym on Wednesdays, you never see your gym teacher. So the teachers will have a calendar of the rotation, and they'll know when they will see their kids in person and when they will only see kids virtually, so that they can plan accordingly.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Jen, can I ask you a question about Cider Mill? If we go to a hybrid model or a full remote, I guess, and it's a shortened day, what happens with world language? Will it be considered one of the main subjects, or is that going to be considered not every day anymore, or whatever?
So we're running basically a regular schedule with the hybrid and the full-in schedule. So like on Wednesday, it would probably be an early release, kind of like that shortened day schedule where all classes are seen, including world language, just because it's a typical schedule. For the question about the specials, it would still be the 4 specials that we usually run. In the past couple of years, we've run either a 4 or an 8-day rotation. The 4-day rotation would fit very nicely into the, an AA, Wednesday, BB pattern. We may also, though, consider doing just rotating through like the regular cycles, because it might off kilter. The different specials that folks, that the students engage in when they're on site and remote. So there's like 3 different ways that we're looking at it, but we're going to make sure that all of the kids have an opportunity for each special, both on site and remotely, if that answers.
And Jen, to be clear about world language.
World language will not be part of the special rotation
Right,
for
so,
hybrid or for the full on-site learning.
so kids are, okay, I just want to be clear because not everybody knows what the schedules at Sugar Mill are. And I guess just really simply, kids are getting direct instruction in world language in every model, correct?
We haven't really had the conversation around what the model looks like for Plan C. I think that's more of a district conversation if we're running, so I don't want to speak to that. I would assume, but I can say yes for Plan A and yes for Plan B.
Great. I'll say yes for Plan C.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so to talk a little bit more about remote learning, first of all, I just want to clarify that regardless of which of the 3 plans we're talking about, Plan A, the in-person, there is an option for remote learning within that. Within Plan B, with the hybrid, obviously it's the half-half, so certainly it's the remote learning versus the on-person at the same time, and then there's fully remote. So each of them have that remote learning part of it. So in terms of, lots of what we talked about, Schoology has been really important in the implementation and will support the implementation of the curriculum in all of the 3 plans. Within that platform, we'll be able to support a variety of different types of engagement, whether we're on site or remote. Like I said, we've got Zoom that's integrated within it for that real-time live instruction. But within Schoology, there are lots of different features that really provide way of really leveraging the technology for discourse, for collaboration, for independent work, for practice, for accessing lots of different online tools like iExcel and others that students use on a regular basis. So whether students are on site or remote learning, they're going to be engaging in a combination of these types of instruction throughout the day. And then finally, as I spoke about before, we have an actual teacher station that's now been created specifically to address the needs of what teachers will need to do with the hybrid remote learning part of it and being able to safely physically distance even within the classroom. Because what really we need to keep in mind that even if we have students in front of us, we're not sharing materials necessarily, we're not passing out papers as we normally do. All of those types of things will help us by having things like a document camera where you can put a visual, a globe, a map, all kinds of things underneath and be able to present it and stream that content, and be able to have students submit assignments using Schoology or engage in discussion in that way. So all of those things really help us with the remote learning as well as on-site teaching.
Can I ask a question? Have we given any thought to, so you have this kind of teacher docking type station in the classroom. If we're in a fully remote environment, are those tools or things that teachers could then have in their house as a docking station? Like, I'm just, I sometimes I even envision being a remote and allowing teachers to go into the classroom and just have the day from their classroom anyway. So I'm just trying to, in order to make it kind of seamless in that respect as well, if there's been thought or tools or resources along those lines.
Yeah, that's a great question. Some of these tools are portable. The laptop, of course. The document camera is actually quite small and it wraps up and it's easy to bring. Obviously, the sound field system is not. And the docking station, and there's other pieces of it that are not, but there are a couple of pieces that would be portable and mobile.
Well, I guess the question is, if we are full remote learning with the students not being in school, why can't the teachers be in their classrooms with all the capabilities they have?
Yeah, I wouldn't. I think this is it's a question that I don't think we can answer tonight. You know, as kind of Ruth was asking the question,
Yeah, I mean,
occurred to me. So I think we need to have a plan for both. So what if teachers have to be home because the spread in the community is such that, you know, we're advised to stay indoors as much as possible or stay in our homes as much as possible. And, you know, perhaps there's some other middle ground that would enable teachers to be in the classrooms, even though students were home.
yeah,
So,
that I think would, I mean, obviously if you have, whatever, the high school is a giant building. There's no reason in the world, just, you know, distance separation or whatever, social separation you call it. They don't have to be next to each other, but they can certainly be in the classrooms with all the capabilities they have to teach from the classroom. And that, I think, should be our objective. Even if we're full remote for the students, the teachers should be in the classrooms. They should show up every day and be there every day for the full school day, teaching. Anyway, okay.
and were there other pieces? Yeah, go ahead.
Ready? Okay. So in terms of progress monitoring, our teachers are going to use the usual classroom and district assessments to monitor student progress and to collaborate and to coordinate supports and student enrichment. I think it's important to also note that we will be returning to the grading policies and practices that we had prior to the pandemic. We truly believe that by first using the Schoology platform, but also all of the other kind of operations and structures we're putting into place, we can hold kids accountable for their learning and grade them appropriately. We also have to really give a lot of thought to the issue of community of learners, particularly during remote learning. So as we are developing our units in Schoology, we are infusing within all of those opportunities to teach and reinforce social emotional competencies. And we're also going to be using our mental health staff to identify students who may be struggling or disengaging, and to check in with families, particularly around something like student attendance and engagement. So any questions about this? I think it's important to note, and I'm not sure if it's on this slide or another slide, but attendance will be expected for all students, and we will be taking attendance on students.
Chuck, you asked if there are any questions about the first bullet here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's students have access to counselors, and I just wonder what that will look like. What will that look like? We all know if you're on site, my guess is you will have access to a counselor. And hybrid, you'll be there half the time, so perhaps, you know, that's sufficient, you know, for that sort of real in-person interaction. In the, you know, the worst case scenario where everybody has to stay at home, and hopefully it does not get there, but I'm just wondering what kind of interaction has there been or would there be between the counseling staff and the kids?
Well, I have to say, even in the spring, our counseling staff did an amazing job reaching out to all of the students on their caseloads. And
right, I heard that. So that was one of the high points. So that they're ready to continue that?
Absolutely, absolutely. And you know, the important point here is during a remote situation, it's really an all hands on deck approach, where we are going to have our mental health staff and our school counselors meeting on a regular basis, dialoguing with teachers and families, and trying to identify those students who are struggling, you know, whether it's academically or socially or emotionally, and to plan some interventions. And that could be, you know, group interventions or even one-to-one counseling. And maybe even referral to outside organizations. So.
Chuck, regarding attendance, are we taking daily attendance or are we taking attendance in every class?
Well, at the elementary schools, it will be daily. At the secondary, it will be by period, I believe. Right, Fran?
Yes.
Yes.
We do both. We do daily and by period.
Okay.
And the parents can check on Schoology to see their children's attendance or lack thereof?
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
Correct, Fran?
We'll have to get back to you on that. I believe it's definitely available through PowerSchool.
It's the Power School portal.
Yeah. through the
Okay.
portal.
As long as parents can double check somewhere.
Yeah, it's through the portal.
I'm not sure that, I could be wrong about this, but I'm under the impression that parents can look at the daily attendance in the Power School portal. I'm not certain that they can actually look at the period by period attendance in the portal.
Oh. I personally had some issues with maybe my kids missing some Zoom things, but at the same time, it wasn't always strictly enforced. But I want to make sure that, you know, especially for parents who are working or that there's going to be an ability to have them see that at the end of the day, the kids made every class that they needed to get to. So if there's, I mean, obviously, if this is not something we can do, but it would be great if there's a way that either PowerSchool or Schoology could be able to tell them that.
Gretchen, I'll offer you a couple of thoughts. I think, you know, we have the tools that we have, and I think this is not an obligation that I would want to solely saddle on all of our teachers with all of expectations that we have. And so I think, you know, we've begun to talk about in this, you know, pandemic era, really reinforcing this idea of shared responsibility. And, you know, I'll tell you, you know, as an educational practitioner, that's important that we're clear around roles, responsibilities, expectations of our professional staff. But also as a father, you know, I also have to think differently about how I'm on the home side, managing and monitoring what's happening with my kids. So, you know, kind of together, you know, with their teachers, we can keep an eye on things. And so I think, you know, culturally across the district, we have to think about some of our practices differently. And, you know, while we haven't developed a plan about this, we do need to have conversations about ways that we can ramp up, even if it's, you know, kind of low level and informal, but ramp up communication, you know, between parents and teachers. And so, you know, again, going back to Schoology, I don't want to suggest it's a panacea and it's going to solve all our problems, but I was particularly attracted to the opportunity as a parent that I have to go in and see, you know, some of the work assignments that my children will be responsible for, the calendar feature, which I believe as teachers are scheduling Zoom sessions and the like, I'd be able to kind of note that and then, you know, reinforce, you know, here in the house that, you know, they show up and get there. But I think, you know, together we can, you know, work to make sure that, you know, kids are doing what they need to do. And certainly a big part of this in terms of the shared culture and shared responsibility is our own students. And I think this is a great conversation for all parents to have with their children about, you know, what's different in this moment and what in terms of responsibility, you know, can students do and think about differently to help better manage themselves. And, you know, obviously that's different developmentally across, you know, ages and grades, but, you know, with older students for sure, they are available and, you know, ready for this kind of conversation.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I didn't want, and I certainly didn't want the teachers getting like, you know, 50 emails a day saying, oh, you know, did my child make it to here? So it was one of those, I was kind of looking on the parent side is like, how can we double check? And so, but thank you.
If I may, I do think that because synchronous learning is going to be required and attendance is going to be taken, it's going to be, you know, we have protocols at the team level and in their regular meetings with the school counselors to track kids who are showing any signs of having struggles with engaging, and certainly having any kind of frequent absence from all classes or from particular classes that students may be avoiding is a pattern that would be picked up very quickly, and that certainly we would be proactive about communicating with parents.
Okay.
And in fact, each of the schools does have an attendance committee, and on the second bullet here, it's primarily our mental health staff and our school counselors, and they are monitoring attendance very carefully and reaching out to students who show a pattern of disengagement.
It's a whole different ball game than last spring because of the requirement to attend.
Yes.
Great. Thank you.
Sure. So in terms of the supports available to students, we have our classroom teachers who are our biggest support to our students for their academic growth, both our general ed teachers and our special ed teachers, but also our interventionists, our related staff, related service staff, as well as our paraprofessionals. And I've already talked to you about our mental health staff and the supports that they will provide to students. It's also important to note that our ELL students will continue to receive their full set of mandated services, and so will students who receive special education supports and services. I did want to note that we are in the process of developing training videos and for some of the younger kids' social stories that we will share prior to the start of school so that students can begin to learn those health and safety protocols and so that they come to school ready and that parents can reinforce those before school starts. In terms of our instructional effectiveness teams, I think that's a term that you're all familiar with. We have grade level and program-based teams, and they will continue to meet on a regular basis to plan instruction and monitor student progress. They'll be looking at student work, student performance data, to set learning goals and make recommendations for support. They will also spend a lot of time, particularly this year, planning for curriculum implementation using the Schoology platform. And as we've developed the professional learning calendar, we have tried very hard to prioritize this work throughout the school year and to regularly schedule time for staff to stop, figure out where students are, and make adjustments to the curriculum moving forward. We are going to be asking our teachers to, on a regular basis, be sharing the learning outcomes with families so that they are aware of what's coming up, either by week or by month. And we will certainly be continuing our professional learning during those instructional effectiveness days.
Chuck, can I just ask a quick question? It
Sure.
just goes back to the one where you were talking about having videos or, social stories, etc.
Yes.
There also been perhaps any thought about doing kind of like virtual tour videos for the incoming kindergartners and perhaps kids that are going to Cider Mill and Millbrook, so they don't get a chance to see the school before their first day. There's kind of like, someone walking around with a camera on video beforehand so they can get a flavor of what's going on or something, something.
Yes, we've absolutely had some discussions about that. I don't think we've finalized any of our plans, but I could ask my friends, again, at Cider Mill and Miller Driscoll to give you their initial thoughts around that.
Right. So at Miller Driscoll, we just met with our leadership team and we landed on, obviously, we want to make sure that our kindergartners start off on the right foot. So we're going to do a meet the teacher virtually, and we're actually going to do that at each grade level. And yes, it's going to be live. There might actually be some pre-recorded footage to make sure they're seeing all parts of the building, but it'll be comprehensive. We'll see teachers with masks on and masks off, so they're excited and they can get to meet their teacher and see their classroom.
I know that, we were just planning this actually this week. So I believe we're all doing a virtual just because of the sheer number of people. Logistically trying to get them in and out of our buildings, we found just to be impossible once we started planning down that route. So we settled on a virtual where they'll be able to see the classroom, see the teachers without the masks. I also think that those half days that we're going to have with just one grade level are going to be really critical to really get our students used to being back into the school environment and the unique environment that they will find themselves in. So we're going to use a schedule that we've used in the past. We've worked to kind of stagger our meet teacher days so that there's a small overlap, but they are informal, so that folks with siblings kind of across our buildings are able to access at least a good part of the different grade levels at the various schools. And we'll be sharing that probably next week. We'll have Lucille send it out.
I don't know if the same question goes for the middle school.
Yes.
So we will be doing a pre-recorded virtual Meet the Teacher from each of the teams. And as you may be familiar with the Link crew up at the high school, we have a wonderful web. Web stands for Where Everybody Belongs. It's a student facilitated mentoring program that some of our staff members coach. And so my understanding is that the web kids are already making video tours and that they're planning a full-on orientation experience with the 8th grade mentors and the 6th graders through Zoom. And that will include some virtual tours of the building as well.
That's great. Thank you.
The high school has a freshman orientation that's going to be online and run by the Link crew and also the faculty that are involved in that. And that'll happen, I think it's a 2 or 3 hour online segment in late August.
I think it's August 20th, actually.
All right, well, that's a nice segue into family engagement.
Okay, so this basically is a great transition to this slide, which speaks to the importance of family engagement and communication. Our district and building leaders regularly send out parent communication. That, of course, will continue. There'll be regular updates to parents. Teachers will, if we are remote or hybrid, check in with parents on a regular basis. And one of the things that I'm really excited about for parents is the ability for them to have their own access to Schoology, which will provide them with the ability to see each of their children's content in terms of the lessons that are happening, submissions, and even important dates and updates, which is another feature that will be very helpful. And of course, where needed, documents will be translated.
So that pretty much concludes our presentation. Are there any lingering questions or thoughts?
I think it's tremendous work. You know, so thoughtful, comprehensive. You know, we're just getting a flavor about how complicated things are. But I think, you know, the work to date is really impressive. And you know, we're getting a good picture. And of course, there are, you know, crucial details still, not details, but crucial elements still to be decided. But I like the way that we're going methodically and systematically, you know, certainly under pressure. But I don't want to do anything in a rush. I don't want to cut any corners, you know, just to say we did it first. I'd rather do it, you know, the best we can. And so I think we can tell you're a tremendous amount of work and the teamwork that's going on and the sensitivity to all the different kids' ages, you know, so elementary school needs and the high school needs, et cetera. So anyway, thank you for all that. And thank you for taking our questions. I know there are 100 more questions, you know, on granular details that we, you know, can't really engage in tonight. But anyway, thank you for the in-depth viewpoint or overview you've given us tonight.
Well, thank you, Debbie. I appreciate it. It really has been a collaborative effort among the whole team.
Yeah, I can tell. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so again, quite a monumental work in progress, but so much good progress. So thank you.
Yeah, and just to, so in terms of next steps, we're going to continue to refine the plans. we know that hopefully, for those who are at home listening tonight, hopefully this was helpful in terms of painting a picture and filling in some details. But as I said at the outset, we'll be working with the principals at each building to set up some direct parent communication. We'll post all this information to the website. And as you've seen, we've gotten lots and lots of feedback over the last several weeks from lots of members of our community, both parents as well as teachers. And, we'll take that into account, continue to monitor the situation here in the community, and then, come back hopefully in another 2 weeks with solid recommendations based on good science, good data, and, clear reasoning.
Right, and I just want to make sure, just to remind everyone that in Wilton, we're going to sort of make a final determination based on a school by school basis. So Miller Driscoll, then Cider Mill, then Middlebrook, then the high school. So which of these models is implemented could end up being the same, or it could end up being different. But we're going to decide on a site-by-site basis based on the most recent health data that will be available, the guidance from the State Department of Health, the State Department of Health, and our local Department of Health and our medical advisor. So we're going to follow, so I guess I've heard too many pundits on the news, but we're going to follow the science, or whatever the phrase is, and base it site by site. And so again, mid-August is, hopefully the final determination in terms of which and when and where. But in the meantime, you will get we're getting a better and better picture of, if it's this, it's going to look like this is going to happen. So thanks for that.
Yeah, and then crucial step for us, at the very early part of next week, we're going to send a follow-up survey to all our families, and we're going to ask parents to take, we'll provide this information in the slide deck that you just saw tonight, as well as an FAQ document, just again to help fill in some more questions. And we're going to ask parents to let us know, if they intend to participate in the kind of in-person program in whatever form or fashion we have it, whether it's hybrid or everybody back, or if they're intending on participating in that full remote program. That's going to be really critical information, so we can go back and look at our class list and really then make some additional plans about how we're going to structure ourselves. So my intention is to put that survey out in the community early in the week next week. Parents were wonderful in the first round in responding almost immediately, so we got great data right away. So my expectation would be by the end of the week, we have really good information to turn back to our administrators in the buildings, and then they can carry forward their next round of plan making.
Okay, all right. We'll move on then to the next item on the agenda, which is under possible action. But we are going to talk about the additional staffing needed to support the school reopening plans. And Kevin, and I know Anne's here, so obviously this will involve FTE, different kinds of personnel, the needs, why, and the dollar figures that go with that.
Yeah, so I just shared my screen here, and so you, this is the document I sent to you a short while ago. So in working with all of the building level administrators and considering what we need to do in terms of implementing some of those various mitigation strategies, cohorting and the like, and trying to keep kids contained, as well as responding to changes in our student population, and then addressing cleaning and supervision needs. What I'm asking the board tonight is to consider approving on temporary one-year contracts an interim world language teacher at Middlebrook, a 1.0, half-time PE health teacher at Middlebrook, 1.0 additional FTE in kindergarten at Miller Driscoll, 7 temporary custodians, and then 2 building subs per additional building substitutes per school, so 8 total, and then additional cafeteria aides at Middlebrook. So the total there is $902,000. Additionally, we're asking the board to approve 2 additional special education paraprofessionals, 1 each for Cider Mill and Miller Driscoll. I think 2 important points here. One is Andre's informed me that she can reallocate other lines in her budget to cover the cost. So this isn't a budget addition. And we had a number of students move into the district this summer, and 2 of those students have some complex needs. And so Andre is recommending that we add paraprofessionals to support those 2 additional students. We have additional recommendations to add campus supervisors, as well as an additional paraprofessional at the high school. And so I want to make the board aware that these are recommendations that are out there, but I'm asking to defer action on these items temporarily. And, you know, as we're continuing to refine our plans and getting more granular about what the specific supervision needs are at the high school, the middle school. I think 3 of those were also allocated at Cider Mill. I will come back and, you know, it may be this recommendation or it may be a revised recommendation, but I'll have that for you the next time we meet.
Can you tell me how the breakdown of the salaries for the world language teacher and the kindergarten teacher, as well as the PE teacher?
Sure. So
yeah, how do you get to $131,000, Kevin, for one teacher? I'm not that. When I first saw that late this afternoon, that it's like, wait a minute, what in the world are we doing?
I asked Marianne the same question. And so what she's looking at here is a teacher coming in at master's 14, and then a fully loaded family health package. So this represents the high, not the necessarily actual cost.
Wow. So, wow. Okay. I just, I was blown away by that. You know, the odds of, all right. Okay. Yeah.
So that would be sort of an outside limit.
Yeah.
Is what you're saying, that's kind of a,
yeah,
in terms of salary and benefits on the expensive side, and the fullest possible insurance package?
That's correct. So on the other end, you know, if you went, you know, a brand new teacher who is just taking single insurance, you know, then you're in the $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 range all in.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Kevin, can you talk a little bit about the aides at Middlebrook for the cafeteria if we're eating lunch in our classrooms?
Well, so this is, and I'll invite Lauren as well. So we call them cafeteria aides, and that's a bit of a misnomer because they're not actually working in the cafeteria. These are folks who would be providing additional supervision of lunches while kids are in their classrooms. And so one of the conundrums we're trying to overcome is not only creating space so students can eat their lunch, but also enabling time so teachers can have their, you know, contractual duty-free lunch. But Lauren, do you want to speak a little bit more about that recommendation?
Sure. The efficiency of having, you know, 300 kids in a cafeteria, you don't actually need that many adults supervising, but if you have 300 kids spread across 15 spaces, or even in a hybrid model, if you have 150 kids spread across 15 spaces, you want to, especially if you're trying to reinforce all of the social distancing during an informal, less formal part of the day for the kids, it's a real supervisory puzzle, how to get strong coverage where we need it. On top of that, we would have kids needing to access the bathroom during that time and managing maximum capacity in the bathrooms. So we have multiple bathrooms in play because the grade levels are eating in different sections of the building, in 3 different sections of the building simultaneously. And also we continue to have a commitment to being able to get kids some outside time. That typically when all of the kids are in the cafeteria simultaneously, about halfway through lunchtime, more than half of the coverage typically goes outside. And as kids feel like they're finished, they can clean up and self-select at what point they go outside. And all of that becomes much more complicated because you can't have children really transitioning unsupervised through the hallways. And on top of that, you know, they'd be going to separate recess spaces because they wouldn't be cross-pollinating beyond at least their team level cohort. So supervisory duties during that part of the day are extremely complex.
Okay, thanks.
Would you need all this staff, whether we're full open or whether we're hybrid? would the needs be the same?
If the idea is that the reason you have a hybrid is to have half as many humans in a room, then you don't want to take them and put them in fewer rooms, because then you
No, I'm sorry, Lauren, I didn't mean it just for Middlebrook. I meant in general.
Sorry.
You know, looking at the world language at Middlebrook, do you need that, you know, whether it's full open or whether it's hybrid open, you know what I mean?
Sure. So let's talk about the world language for a minute. Historically, Middlebrook had 9 world language teachers, 1 per team. And because we could not find a dual certified candidate, we contracted to having only 8 world language teachers for last year. That was not a planned change. It had to do with finding a dual certified candidate that was strong enough to meet our standards. So the way that we were staffing world language, at that point, it stayed in the budget because it was an efficiency. What that means is that on 4 of our teams, I believe, at any given time, there are times in the day when 5 classes are being offered, and there are times in the day when 4 classes are being offered, because there's one time in the day on each of those teams where the world language teacher is teaching kids from a different team. Now, you cannot keep the cohorts consistent with 5 groups running if sometimes you have 5 groups and sometimes you have 4 groups. So there's no way to really cohort beyond the team level unless you add back in the world language teacher, so that on all 9 teams, when you have classes running, you've always got 5 offered.
Okay.
So we have 1 French teacher who teaches he teaches this coming year French in both 7th grade and 8th grade. And the Spanish teacher, the 0.8 person, would be his counterpart. He would teach that person would teach the Spanish classes on those same 2 teams. It also reduces, if you have the 4 world language teachers from the other teams, teaching kids, they'd be traveling into a pod that they don't normally teach in, and it just increases the cross-pollination between those cohorts.
Right, okay. For the kindergarten at Miller Driscoll, is that enrollment based, or is that social distancing, we don't want to exceed a certain class size based?
Yeah, it's social distancing. We are watching enrollment carefully, and we're seeing a slight uptick, although, we're not seeing numbers yet that match the home sales. And so, what we're proposing here too, as we're thinking about these flexible models and going back to some of Janine's commentary about, what we think is best for young kids, in addition to trying to maintain smaller classes to social distance, we're also looking for an opportunity, if we need it, to create some flexibility in how we deploy teachers to provide the additional instruction.
Yeah, Kevin, how much of this would be recoverable with the support that hopefully will be coming either from the state or the federal government if this is COVID driven?
Yeah, I'll defer to Ann on that, but my expectation is we would apply for reimbursement on all of these because COVID-driven hires. Ann, do you want to weigh in?
Yeah, Glenn, on the FEMA side, both on the state, they look at it as what has been budgeted and what have you added. So they're looking at what you've added as items that they will look at to reimburse. FEMA will reimburse 75% of the unbudgeted items that we would submit for. And then based on what they give us back, 75% of all of it or portions of it, then we turn around, we're meant to hit the education fund first, that's up there, but that's approximately $70,000, so it's not a lot. Then we go to the main state each quarter, and this happens every quarter. We track it every quarter, we send it to FEMA, they give us a letter, we turn around the letter to the state, and then we see what the state is going to reimburse at that point.
But we will make every attempt that we can to recover this funding.
Of course.
I'm sure.
Yeah, we're submitting everything that we can. Marianne has been going back through items right now to make sure that everything has been accounted for. She's been diligently tracking everything as it comes across her desk to make sure we're doing everything on both sides, town and Board of Ed.
Great. Okay, good. Okay.
Is there any assurance that all of these, because obviously they're additions to the budget, they are COVID related, does that make them automatically qualify for reimbursement, or are there more criteria out there?
Until we get the first, letter back, their guidance to us right now is anything that's unbudgeted. So these are positions that we would say were not in our budget day one. We've had to add to that, to our budget on it. And then what they come back with. So I should know within 3 weeks what they've done with the first 2 quarters of what we submitted. Now, obviously, these aren't in there yet, but what we've submitted to date.
All right, have we submitted, I'm just wondering, because these are personnel, if there's any special hurdles to get personnel approval. Does that make sense? I mean, PPE is consumable, people get it, but I'm just hoping there that the same understanding extends to personnel, but sometimes there's additional criteria. So I just was asking.
Nothing as of yet. The detail that they want literally is going down to, we have to submit by person, by day.
Okay.
So as detailed as we are doing on the equipment and the PPEs and the technology and everything we're doing there, we have to give extreme details on the payroll side of things. So we had a lot of custodian cleanup when COVID first happened.
Okay.
And the detail that we had to go to on those employees, their hours per day, their hourly rate, and it took us nearly, I think, 7 pages of detail to send to FEMA.
Wow.
So they are looking at it. They're saying it's when it's non-budgeted. And the custodians was only the overtime. So anything that they worked during the day was, even if they were cleaning for COVID, isn't covered because that's their normal budgeted expense. It's at that point, it was only the overtime.
Got it. Okay. So, all right. So we're thinking that 75% will be reimbursed at least, and then there may be further state and federal sort of grant funding. Am I right?
Yes, that is the hope. There's 99 million at the state, but obviously they have a lot of bigger cities that they're going to look at first. I'd have to put that out there. They're going to look at the bigger cities first and the level that they're doing. So we're going to look at this at a quarterly. Hopefully we get this list of staff members would be approximately an additional 150 a month for us. So we would look to say, okay, can we start getting into the routine if we're getting back our quarterlies to try and cover what we're putting out of pocket before, we probably have to put some sort of a semi-freeze in place to make sure we're covering the exact of what we need as each month goes by.
Okay. And can you just, one of my last questions, can you tell me a little bit of the building subs? Just what you're anticipating and how they fit into the COVID needs and support.
Right. I mean, we're anticipating a significant increase in staff absences. And so we rely on our building subs to perform a variety of functions, but primarily to cover staff who are out. We prefer building subs because they're ours. We try to get certified building subs when we can find them. And then since they're ours full time, it enables us to really do some significant training with them so they can do a more effective job of filling in for teachers that may be absent.
Okay, great.
And just out of curiosity, Kevin, and this might not be the right time to talk about it, but it just triggered in my head. Are we doing something about like training of substitutes for what happens if we're in a fully remote situation and a teacher is also unable to teach that class even remotely, in terms of a substitute in that regard?
Yeah, Maria, do you want to speak to that?
Yes, in fact, we've actually already started that. We had a number of our building subs, actually all of our building subs in the spring were trained in the different platforms that we used in the spring session so that they could step in if they were needed. In addition to that, they had access to all of the training modules that we provided for paraprofessionals and many of the ones that we provided for certified staff. And so a number of the building subs that are returning to us already have a good amount of professional learning that they're returning with. And we're going to increase that by giving them access to a number of the modules that we have for this year, in addition to some Schoology training, and some other things. So that's already underway, and we're feeling very good about the training that many of our substitutes participated in the spring.
Can I ask the flip of that? If we go remote and find out that we don't need all of these positions, I know we had talked about this previously about the custodians, about making them temporary. Is there any way to make any of these positions temporary as well?
Yes. Yes, we can do that. I mean, I think, you know, if we go entirely remote, you know, this is a challenging, it's something that's very difficult to predict for, because one of the reasons that we want to have building subs is that they're available to step in at any moment. And I think the better the training we provide, the more likely they're going to be able to provide a high quality product and experience for the students. Many of our substitutes, well, not many of them, but a number of our building substitutes are certified teachers. And so again, we want to have them on hand if teachers are not available to provide even remote learning. We have to be prepared for teachers who may become sick or whose family members may become sick and are not able to teach. So I think, you know, if we did that, we would want to have some that are year-long building subs that are guaranteed the position for the year. And what we might do is hire some additional building subs, maybe these additional positions that we're discussing this evening, for perhaps a 4-month period as a trial basis, and then make a decision about what the long-term commitment would be.
Okay. It's a really big number. I don't mean just each individual. I'm looking at the overall number is a huge number. And if we don't get funding from FEMA and state, like, we're on the hook for a lot of money.
Yes, this has been an expensive proposition all the way through.
I mean, I get it with, I don't know, I get it with world language, right? I mean, kind of, but not, maybe not really. Right, I get it. Like, if we're in the building, you need to social distance, but if we're back at home, can those classes then, it doesn't help with continuity with the same teacher, but can those kids then split with the other teachers? I'm just trying to think of other options.
Yeah, I don't know with the certified. I don't know that we would do that. I mean, certainly we can, you know, we can go back and kind of talk about those possibilities and, you know, come back with some further thinking. But just thinking about the student experience and creating opportunities at the outset for students to you know, connect and bond and form relationships with their students, teachers rather. And I guess the other piece there is just as we're trying to attract, you know, really good high quality candidates. I don't know what the pool would be like if we said, well, maybe you'll have a job, but, you know, it could go away, and if we flip to full remote. So my experience has been that, you know, particularly certified staff are looking for, you know, at least, you know, year-long commitments.
Right, which I understand. I mean, I guess the same thing with Jim too.
Yeah.
It's, if we go remote.
And we hire them, and no matter what happens, they're on board for the full year. So that's, it's not a, we are not hiring them as a temporary role.
Well, it's, I think for that, you know, the proposal as I've laid it out, you know, at least for the world language teacher, the PE teacher, the kindergarten teacher at Miller Driscoll, my recommendation would be those are year-long appointments. You know, Maria's comment a moment ago about, you know, setting up a different construct for some of the building subs. I think that's something that we should look at really pretty carefully, and that we might give us some of the wiggle room, you know, you're wondering about.
Is there a way to reach out to our community also and find out how many kids are actually coming to school before we start hiring? I know that it's a tricky question too, right? Because, you know, people could say they're not coming, and then decide to come, and then you're kind of in a pickle. But
the good news is we're gonna survey next week, and so you know, I can't imagine that we'll be in a position to have people in place by a week. So perhaps, you know, that'll be serendipitous, and we'll have a set of numbers that might you know, preclude us from needing to make some of these hires if the numbers are of in-person attendance aren't what we're anticipating.
So for tonight, we're looking at possibly approving everything except the campus supervisors and the paraprofessional. Am I right? At the high school there, at the bottom two.
Yes.
Okay. It would probably help me at least to have a little bit more information. I know you're not asking it for this week, but I would feel more comfortable about campus supervisors if I heard a little bit more about the need. And I'm kind of looking at the building subs, and they are relatively speaking, inexpensive. It's relative, right? But you know, could you hire more building subs for some of the campus supervisor positions?
I think we have to look at the work and the responsibilities.
Sure. Okay.
Maria, wait, and maybe we come back to that if that's okay. We'll you know, ask.
Yeah, we're not gonna. Yeah, we don't have to dive into that tonight, but it's just a question. Some of them seem a little bit more affordable than other positions, but I think we all understand, and we have known for a while that we were going to get additional staffing requests, and so okay, but you know, again, we're a little bit you know, not surprised, but stunned at the figure, you know, when it's right in front of you in black and white.
Deborah, I move that we support, you know, this position. And I think we need to trust Kevin and his staff. Kevin has always demonstrated a great deal of fiscal responsibility and control and constraint. This is worst case scenario. Hopefully we'll get reimbursed by FEMA for the significant portion of this. But if he says it has to happen, then this is what he needs to do the job he's been charged to do. So I move that we support this and move forward.
Okay, is there a second?
I'd rather wait until we get more information about numbers.
Okay, can you, what would you like more about?
How many kids are actually going to be in the building, maybe? That would support having all of these options?
That's only solving the kindergarten, though, isn't that?
Wouldn't it also possibly solve the world language?
I thought the world language was replacing somebody who had left. No? Oh, sorry.
No, it's enabling us to you know, to cohort kids more effectively.
And same with the PE teacher.
That's right.
I guess my concern, Jen, just I get the waiting a bit. My concern is that because the survey is kind of an answer for a moment in time, and it's not something that, you know, a parent is held to, that if we wait, maybe we won't be able to find the candidates that we're looking for.
I hear you. I still can't get around the number. I don't know how you guys, I don't know how we come up with that kind of money if we don't get reimbursed for it. I mean, that means we're going back to the town and asking for almost $1 million that we haven't put aside in separate budgets, right? I mean, we put aside, what, $350,000 and another $350,000, like that's, which doesn't even account for.
But to me, it sounds like we're going to get reimbursed something. It might not be 75%, but I don't expect that the town is going to be on the hook for the whole $902,000.
But do we fall behind the other cities, like Anne was saying? Like, where do we fall in the grand scheme? Like, right, there's an amount of money available, and if they give it to all the other towns or cities that don't have as much money as Wilton, are we, you know what I mean? Like, eventually that money runs out, and where do we stand?
Well, yeah, what I was understanding from Anne, and maybe she can clarify, is that FEMA money, that is not big cities go first. It's the money that after FEMA, you know, the rest, like FEMA 75%, and then the odds of us getting the remaining 25% could get into the situation you're talking about, limited grants at the state or federal level. But Anne, can you talk about with more certainty about the FEMA money?
The FEMA money is what you say. They don't, well, from my knowledge, it's not like they're going to go to the big cities, Chicago and all that, and say they're going to get it first. We submit in our conversations with our representative. Once it's approved, they will pay 75% of whatever they have approved. And to date, they have stated what we submit as unbudgeted is what they're looking at. So until I get that first letter from them in about 2-3 weeks, that will be the indication of what level they are looking at us from a reimbursement standpoint.
And we can't wait 3 weeks to vote on this.
No, we could ask that things, that we sign contracts as late as possible.
Yeah, here's something to consider. I think, in considering this list in action tonight, I think the addition of the temporary custodians is essential because we're going to need additional staff to clean high-touch areas. Those high-touch areas are going to be high-touch whether you have all kids in or half the kids in. And so as I talked to Jose about, whether this was still a need in a hybrid setup, the answer was yes. The only time it would not be a need is if we're in full remote. But I think we have to plan for students being back in the buildings in some capacity. Additionally, I think the 2 SPED paraprofessionals are important. That's budget neutral because Andrea has committed to finding funds within a couple of her other lines in that budget. So I would say tonight, if it helps, perhaps take action on those 2 staffing requests. I think we should go ahead for positions, and it'll take us a week plus to work through an application process, form a pool, conduct interviews, et cetera. And then I think we can meet Jen's desire to have a clearer picture of how many students are going to be in the building. And then we can hold that up against some of these staffing requests and just see what further insight we develop.
Okay, so you're asking to approve the custodial staff additional at 7.0 for 400,000 approximately, plus the 2 SPED paraprofessionals, which is, that's not COVID related. Am I right? Is that just a matter of special ed student placement?
Correct. Yeah, so the COVID additions it's just the $400,000 in temporary custodians.
Okay, so Glenn, there was not a second for your original motion.
Nope. So I will, I will withdraw my original motion.
Okay.
And resubmit that we do approve the additional custodian commitment because we've got to get those guys hired and get them ready at $400,000. Okay.
Okay.
One question about the temporary, just so I'm sure, is if we go fully remote, that they were on some sort of a temporary contract, that at some point if we go remote, or is it just after 4 months we decide if we're keeping or not keeping? Like,
so
what in March?
They would be on temporary contract. So, and that's 120 days essentially. But really, if we didn't need them in 90 days, we wouldn't be required to keep them on if we no longer had the need to have them. This is truly, it's temporary work the same way that we post for temporary work in the summers when we need positions for additional summer work. So this is not the same type of commitment that we would have to other positions.
Okay. Okay, I truly, I'm not trying to be difficult. I hope you guys understand that. And I'm not trying to say that we shouldn't socially distance and have these people in place. It's just the number that's concerning.
Nobody's saying you're difficult, Jen.
Honestly.
No.
Nobody's saying it. Nobody's thinking it.
And I just want to add that the number for the temporary custodians, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that would be if we kept them for the entire year. So, that really would be the worst case scenario. If we, our plan would be to monitor the situation very, very closely. And, we have that 120-day window, and certainly anytime within that, we could reduce the number or eliminate all 7 if we didn't need them. But that number would be if we kept all 7 for the entire year.
Is there, and there's no option to do less days, like to go like check in every 2 months to see? I guess my other concern, we're talking $400,000, and if we go fully remote, are we on the hook? I mean, after 120 days, we either hire or we don't hire. And if we're still in school, I would assume that we would then hire them. But if we then go out of school in March, February, whenever, after a 120-day period, we're on the hook for paying them, even if we're not in school?
I think we'd have a little bit more flexibility with the custodial staff. It's not the same as offering a full year contract the way that we do with teachers. So I think part of that, I can't give you a hard and fast answer to that, because I don't know whether there will be additional executive orders the same way that there were this year, where we were required to pay certain staff.
Right.
I can tell you it's not the same type of contract that we have with, a certified staff member, but I don't know exactly what executive orders may be put in place. So I can't answer that definitively.
Okay. I mean, is it possible to make it on a shorter term and then just re-up the term, or do you worry about not getting people to do it at that point, or is that not even an option?
It is I mean, you can make it for the shorter term. We can take a break and then look at rehiring people again. We have to follow the custodial contract, which is pretty specific that after 120 days, people become full-time employees. But again, we posted the positions as short-term positions, and our intention is to monitor them very carefully. And I think, we would be very judicious about the decisions that we make for the number that we would keep long-term, if any. I mean, I would imagine that if we are in school, we are going to need close to that number, if not that entire number. But the plan is to monitor very carefully. And if it looks like we're going to be going out, or, we're going to have more of a hybrid model that may not require the same number of custodians, we would be able to reduce the number of the temporary custodians that we have in place. Again, I don't know exactly what the executive orders will be after that 120-day period and people become full-time employees, but I do feel reasonably comfortable that we have more flexibility with those positions than we do with the others.
Okay, so if I'm hearing you correctly, it doesn't matter if it wouldn't matter if we shortened them to 60 days, like regardless, if we did 2 60-day periods at the end of 120 days, you have to make a decision.
Well, it's 120 days continuous. So, I'd have to look into whether or not, we could have people on for 60 days and then furlough them because we don't need them and maybe recall them. I'd have to look into whether we'd be able to do that. There's also an efficiency piece. If we brought people on for 120 days, or let's just say 120 days, and then just eliminated those positions and then reposted for 7 new positions 3 weeks after that, you spend time in interviews and things like that. So I don't know that that would be the most efficient way of proceeding if we actually needed those positions.
You can't just extend their contract? You can't extend?
No, you can't extend it without breaking the contract. We could look to see whether the union would allow some sort of memorandum of understanding that would allow us to extend that 120-day period, but the contract is written so that after 120 days of continuous employment, those positions become permanent positions. So the contract as it's written now won't allow for that. However, these are unusual circumstances and we write memoranda of understanding all the time with unions. And so that's certainly a possibility. It's just the way that the contract is written now, we would have to follow the 120-day period. However, it's certainly possible that the union might agree to that, recognizing that these are very unusual circumstances and recognizing that it's an opportunity to create jobs for people, even if it's in the short term.
The preface says my understanding is they're not more than 1 year anyway.
Well, there's a 1-year probationary period. Oh, the preface of what, the proposal or the contract?
Yeah, we would be.
Proposal, it says 1-year position.
Right.
Correct.
So whether they make it, you know, past the 120 and then they're sort of on full contract, it's still for a 1-year contract. Am I right at most?
Yes.
Yes, I mean, they don't have contracts, but yes, it would be, we've posted it as a 1-year term.
Got it.
But, well, actually, we haven't. We've posted it as temporary work. So if it extended beyond that, what we would communicate to people is it's up to a year, potentially.
Okay. So these people could not be hourly?
They are hourly. They're hourly, yes, they are hourly employees. I believe that the number that Ann calculated is just their hourly rate times 40 hours times the number of weeks that they work over the course of the year.
Okay, so if there was a week that we didn't need them 40 hours, we needed them 32 hours, that's acceptable?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, now again, if we extended them and they became our employees and there was an executive order that required that we paid people a certain amount of money, then that might be a different situation. But I you know, I have no way of predicting that. But right now.
Right, but we can use them the hours we need, which is.
Yes.
Okay. And we don't have to have them for hours we don't need them.
That's right.
Even if we have them over 120 days, it's still the hours we need.
Yes, I think we would have to, yes, we can do that.
Okay, because that, Jen, that would get your concern, you know, they'd be paid for hours worked.
I think so, right? So even if we missed, right, you get over your 120 days, then beyond that, you're only paying for the hours that they're actually working, which means if we're not in the building, we're not paying them anyway.
Right.
Except for if there's an executive order that requires that we pay what their typical work week is. I'm sorry to keep bringing that up. I just want to be sure that I'm not misleading you.
No, no, you're not. But if it's really for hours worked, then I think that gets at the concern about overstaffing.
Right. Okay. Maria, I need a crystal ball. That would help me a good lot.
I know. Don't we all?
Don't we all? It's right.
Okay, well, let's move this along. There was a motion for 7.0 temporary custodians for next year at $400,000 approximately. Understanding now some of the ins and outs of the contracts and potential executive orders. So anyways, to Glenn's motion, is there a second?
Sorry, I second.
Okay. So we're just right now, it's the temporary custodians. I realize that. So we'll do the SPED paraprofessionals separately. Is that okay, Kevin? Okay. All right. So it's been moved and seconded to approve the 7.0 FTE temporary custodians at up to $400,000. Is there any further discussion? All right, all in favor, please signify by saying aye or raising your hand.
Aye.
Aye. Are the, I'm sorry, there's just one aye for me. I'm sorry. Any opposition?
Okay.
Any abstentions? Okay, that sounds, again, I can't see everybody on screen, but it sounds that's unanimous. All right. Let's talk about the SPED paraprofessionals. This is not COVID related. This is student specific to their placement needs. However, this is non-budgeted, but Andrea feels that through reallocating money, it would not necessarily go over budget. Am I right with that?
You are.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve that?
I make a motion to approve the 2 SPED professionals.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Glenn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, that too is unanimous. So we'll come back at our next meeting and dig deeper into world language, PE, kindergarten, building subs, cafeteria aides, campus supervisors, and a paraprofessional. Okay?
Yes, thank you.
All right, no, thank you. All right, that's the end of our action items. You can see that there are more board meetings coming up. Kevin, do you want to keep it going weekly? Do you know yet if you need, which ones you want? Let us know.
I'd like to propose that we do not meet next week, but we plan to meet the following Thursday. And then that'll give us
6th.
And we'll revisit some of these staffing. We'll have more information from our parents and families, and we'll have quite a bit more details in terms of our building action plans to share and publish.
So we'll meet again on the 13th. Is that what you're saying, Kevin?
That is.
No, August. I thought August 6th.
No, week after.
It is next week.
All right, the 13th will be our next meeting.
Correct.
Okay.
All right. So no August 6th meeting.
Correct.
No, you don't need it?
No.
Okay. We are not having a special meeting August 6th, but we are having one August 13th. Okay,
Yeah.
Perfect. All right, comments from the public. Lucille, any emails?
No, there aren't any emails.
Was that a no?
No, yes, it's a no. There are no
Okay.
emails.
All right. All right, great. All right, so thanks everybody again for a pretty intense meeting. Lots covered, lots done. Thank you. This meeting's adjourned.
Yeah. Oh,
Thank you.
Thank you.
okay.
Good night. Take care.
I'm taking your lead, Glenn. You just said I can adjourn it, so I do.
Okay. All right.